What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video on Buy Sell Cars TV. Today we are talking about this 7 Series behind me. Bargain of the century in my opinion. Let me show you this car I picked up at the auction for a super cheap price, give you a walkthrough, take it for a drive and talk about why these cars are such fantastic value for money, and should you buy one, or is it the worst financial decision you could possibly make? But we're going to get into that in the video. So for now, let me give you a walk around of this 7 Series BMW. Right, let's give you a walkthrough of this 730 diesel. So first impressions, it looks really nice for a car that was probably less than, I think, 1,800 quid. Hammer price was 1,550. It looks stunning. The only negatives we really have is this door over here. So it's definitely been painted in the past before, not very well, and you can see we've started to got some lack appeal over here. This has started to corrode as well, probably just made that a bit worse, but that's fine. That's the worst thing on this car in my opinion, looking at the exterior. But in all honesty, for the price I paid for this car, do I care? Not really. Going down the back over here, it is looking like a proper luxury car. It really does stun me in this country, the cars you can buy for such little money. You know, you put a private plate on that, no one's gonna know you're driving around in a car that cost 1,800 quid. Even looking over here down at the back, the car is looking in good condition. Down the passenger side, I've got a couple of little marks over here. Potentially you might be able to wet sand some of these out. It's a bit of a light scrape, shall I say. I reckon we might be able to get some of that out, but the rest of the car down here is looking pretty good. Just the odd little sort of car parking dink. Wheels, how are they looking? Not too bad, just a little bit of corrosion on there, but again, not something which I'm super fussed about. The tyres as well are very, very good. So they've got a set of 4 Continental tyres on there, so that is a plus point. Around the front, what are we missing? So we're missing a tow eye cover. So maybe at some point in its life it's been towed potentially, or it's just fallen off or been stolen. A little bit of condensation in the fog lights. That is a bit common, to be honest, when you get to a car of this age. And on the bonnet, a couple of stone chips, because this is a high miler car. Well, high mileage is probably the wrong word, because it is a car from 2006, but it's done 155,000 miles, so you're going to expect to see things like that in this condition. But overall, in my opinion, I think it looks fantastic. Let's show you the interior, because that is where things get even better. Right, so first impressions on looking on the interior. For a car that has done 155,000 miles, it is looking pretty immaculate. This is one of the reasons why I bought this car, and I saw the photos online from BCA, and the condition of this car just stood out to me. I thought, this looks like a car which is well kept and been maintained. Generally what you do find over the years is these types of cars, they get a couple of owners, you know, the seats will start to sag a lot, and even the bolster, like I know on here we have got a little bit of wear. That is normal, but condition wise, I thought this is looking really, really good. Even the carpet below, there's no mats unfortunately, so I need to buy some, but you can see very, very clean. A little bit of paint over there, so that is actually from me being an idiot the other day. I was doing a bit of painting and decorating, and I got in the car and obviously I stepped in a bit of paint, so that is not ideal. OBD port as well, so I don't know, something's missing over here, so maybe it's had a machine plugged in at some point in its life. You kind of would expect it's a 2006 car. Hopefully it wasn't done at the auction, but I haven't had any issues with the car so far. But the front of the interior, you can see, is looking really good. Let me show you the back as well. So looking at the back as well, you can see the back probably looks even in better condition than the front. The rear seats really do look like they have not been sat in at all. Especially if you look at the back of the, you know, driver's seat and passenger seat over there, you can see there isn't any marks from, you know, kids probably kicking the seats. Headlining is all looking nice and clean, and even just the general door card, the woodwork looks very, very nice. So much space in here as well. You know, if I sit in the back now, give you an idea, I'm 6'4", 6'5". Maybe this is a better angle, but look, I've got plenty of legroom, plenty of headroom, and it's just generally a nice place to be sat in. It really shocks me to think this car cost 1,550 hammer price at the auction. I mean, look at it. That is what you call a luxury looking car from this point of view. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the current condition of the interior and exterior. These cars just really do represent tremendous value for money, and we're going to go for a drive, talk about those reasons of why that is exactly, why I bought this car, and what are my plans with this 7 Series. So let me get my camera set up, we'll take it for a drive, waft along and discuss all of those points about this 730 diesel. So I'll see you shortly, guys. Right, so let's talk about why I bought this car. What were the things which stood out to me to make me want to buy this specific car? Well, there were a couple of things. The first thing was the ownership. So it was a 2-owner car, but I'd done a HPI check on the car before I bought it because I wanted to investigate just that little bit further because I was really intrigued by this car. And the second owner bought this car when it was around 18 months old. So effectively, that second owner has had this car for predominantly the best part of sort of 16 to 17 years. That is a massive plus point in my eyes, because I would have thought that person would have paid top money for this car back in those days. So we're talking 2007, 2008. That was in a recession time as well. So for them to afford this type of car in a recession gives you a bit of an idea of what type of person they may have been. The next point was just the general condition of this car, but more specifically, the interior. When I saw those interior photos of this car, I thought, wow, for a car that has done 150 odd thousand miles, it looked like it had barely been driven. That was such a plus point, because again, these types of cars, when they do get cheaper, they go through a lot of owners, they don't get looked after as much because it's a cheaper car. People tend to, use and abuse them a little bit, shall I say. So the interior just stood out like a sore thumb. The rear seats genuinely looked like they hadn't been sat in. The driver's seat at the time, it had minimal wear apart from on the bolster, which is common even on a car which is 2 or 3 years old. So I knew that 95% chance that this will be a good example of a 7 Series. Now, the third point to back all this up was the service history. Now, this is where things got a bit interesting for me. So the car was advertised with 13 services in the book. It's still reasonable. It's not a full history, shall I say, but last serviced a couple of years ago. So I thought that's still good enough for me. But upon me going to collect the car, it was actually 19 services in the book. So they clearly just missed out a page. And when I saw that and I looked through the service records, I thought, wow, this has really been a well looked after and maintained car. And that showed, because when I started the car up, the engine sounded super healthy. They are 3-litre diesel engines, so they are generally, quite a smooth car to drive. I've had a couple of these 3-litre diesel engines over the years, so I know how they drive and what they feel like. But this was a nice car when I went to pick it up. So now, as we're touching on, I've obviously gone to collect the car. My first impressions, honestly, when I sat in this car was just, I was really taken back to see that this car has been well looked after. There were the odd little chips, especially on the woodwork. It's a car which has been driven. You can't expect it to be in showroom condition, but these are very, very small things in the grand scheme of things. For me, the important things were the overall condition of the car, but more importantly, the engine and gearbox. Those are the two things which are really important to me, because if things start to go wrong with those, and even the suspension as well, the cost will slowly start to add up. So those were the main things I wanted to be more considerate about. But when I just sat in the car, I really was impressed by how luxury this car felt. I've actually had the newest 7 Series to this a couple of years ago, and this car, even though it's the shape before, it felt more luxury to me. All of the wood, the way the center console, all of that is just made, it looks like a more luxury car, whereas the 7 Series on the newer shape, it just felt like a 5 Series. The dash is very bland and very basic, whereas this one gave me more prestige and luxury vibes. And even the center armrest as well, it's massive. You've got huge compartments in there. I like how the controls for the seat are positioned here, so you've got a lot of support on that. Heated seats, memory seats, and nice little toggle over here to control that. It just gives the car a more luxury feel compared to having the buttons on the side of the seats or something. So it's a nice little touch, and I quite like that. Now, as I said, I paid $1,550 hammer price. With the fees, it was around 1,800 quid, I think, but I'll pop on the screen now so you get an exact figure of how much this car cost me. But either way, it's a bargain, right? It's super cheap. Now, that leads to the next thing. Why are these cars so cheap? Why doesn't everyone have a 7 Series, S-Class or A8? Because they really represent fantastic value for money. Well, I think the biggest thing is the potential maintenance costs on these cars. If things do go wrong, it's still a circa £60,000 car from back in those days. So if something goes wrong with it, it's going to be expensive. And I'm sure these cars do have their common faults, electrical issues, potential suspension related things as well. And I guess then they're not going to be cheap to fix. But if you can find a well-maintained car, low owners, very well driven, and really been delicate during their ownership, you're eliminating a lot of that risk straight away. Now, to give you context, I've had this car for probably about a month now or so, and I've driven the best part of 1,500 miles, and I've had no issues at all. This car has been up and down the motorways, driven around town. I've been using it as a work car, and touch wood, I've had no issues with this car at all. It's on 154,792 miles, and it drives so good. The suspension has no creaks at all. You waft along with the air suspension. The seat is comfortable. The only downside to it, it's just a massive car. So if you're not comfortable driving a big car, then it's a bit of a tricky one to maneuver around. You know, the turning circle is pretty crap on these. So that's something you got to think about. But these points are also why they're not necessarily the most popular cars, because they're not super practical for everyone. People like to have a small car that's very, very cheap to run. That is my fuel light. Very, very cheap to run, practical, economical, cheap to insure. And these 7 Series aren't exactly that. You know, I'm not saying they're bad on fuel. The tank was completely empty. I put 124 quid in and I got about 650 miles. So I think when I worked it out, it averaged about 33 or 34 miles to the gallon. But these are built for motorways. On your long journeys, these are amazing on fuel. Around town, not so much. But for me, I love the space of the car. I love the comfort. I'm a tall person, so I'm always going to want to have a bigger car. So for me, I don't mind compromising a little bit of things like, you know, having a heavy fuel for that luxury and for that comfort. But that's just my opinion. So what are my plans with this car? You know, normally I would say I'm going to sell a car. This channel is about buying and selling cars, but I got this car at such a fantastic price, and I'll be honest with you, I've fallen in love with it. I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it is. I knew it was going to be a good car always, but as soon as I drove this car back, I could not believe how comfortable and how luxury this car felt. Just to give you context, and so you know I'm not waffling, years and years ago, I used to drive an S-Class. It was only a couple of years old, good mileage, like 40, 50,000 miles. And I'm genuinely not exaggerating when I say this. This car feels 90% exactly like how that car drove. And that was a newer, low mileage car. So I just wanted to say that to give you context to how this car feels and how this car is driving. So I don't think I'm going to sell this one. I think this is going to be a car which I'm going to keep and most likely use as my daily driver. The boot is absolutely massive. I can just chuck whatever I want in there and it never gets full. I know this is a bit of a nice example and a luxury car to be using as a work car and just, you know, throwing things about, but for me it works. It's nice, it's comfortable, it's got the space, it's got the practicality. If you need to put your family in there, you can chuck everyone in. You know, the bodywork's not perfect. It's got a few marks around the car. It's cheap enough that I'm not worried about it when I leave it parked up. You know, if I came back to it and it had a scrape on it, it's not the end of the world. So for all those reasons, it just ticks a lot of boxes for making me want to keep this car. So that is the plans with this car. This was just a short and quick video just to show you the type of car you can buy for very little money in the UK and my plans with it and just your overall condition of what this car is like, what to expect, and really when you are looking for something, it gives you a comparison with the condition of how this car is. So hopefully that's all come across on this video today. But other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this one. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and I'm going to see you on the next one. Take care, guys.